Welcome back, people. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. I'm Steve Cooper. I'm here with the man. This guy, he's always out there. He's hustling. He's working. He's a great lawyer. He's a great entrepreneur. And it's our host, Mr. John Fagerholm. What's up, John?
What's up, Steve? Great to connect again. I hope you had good Thanksgiving. We haven't had a chance to talk since then. But what's Thanksgiving like in the tri-state area or wherever it is that you live?
You know what it is? It's this year. It was my mother-in-law, my brother-in-law, his wife, and their son coming over, and Joanne cooked. It's basically, it used to be, I went to Cherry Hill East, and there was Cherry Hill East and Cherry Hill West. There were two big teams. And it used to be when I was growing up, every Thanksgiving, we would play a homecoming game because kids would come home from colleges. And all the bars would get packed the night before, Thanksgiving, because we'd all get home from college. Now, none of that goes on. It's like people don't go out and drink like they used to. It's funny. It was big on my generation. Everyone went out and drank. Now, if you go to a bar, when I was younger, you went to a bar and you see an older guy and you go, look, there's a creepy old guy. Now, the bar is all creepy old guys. And you're like, oh, what? There's a young person coming in. So that's what the tri-state area is like. Bars full of creepy old guys waiting for Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah, things sure have changed. The younger generation isn't about it. We used to do Black Wednesday, meaning we get off work and drink the whole night, sleep till noon, get up, go somewhere for Thanksgiving, and then recover the rest of the weekend. That was Thanksgiving weekend for me for many, many, many years.
Yeah, so that's a holiday. Now, Christmas is coming up, and I wanted to talk to you because, we all shop at Christmas, and I always crack up. And I saw something where I got an email from like Bed Bath & Beyond, and I thought they went bankrupt. Can you explain to me, how does a company go bankrupt and I guess not pay any of the people that supplied them with goods? And how do they stay in business? I mean, business law. How does it work?
Well, again, I'm not a bankruptcy attorney, right? But I do know a little bit about bankruptcy because some of my clients, have filed for bankruptcy. So there's two types of bankruptcies. There's the type of bankruptcy where you say, hey, I'm shutting the doors because I can't pay anybody. So give me bankruptcy protection. And then they basically grab whatever assets they have and they try to pay off whatever the creditors from what's left. Then there's a type of bankruptcy that's a reorganization. So I can't pay you guys right now what you're owed, but let's make a deal for what it is and then give me an opportunity to reorganize, make some money again so that I don't completely disappear and not pay you anything. So that's the reorganization. So that's as much as I know about it. And it's basically in passing, hearing and looking at documents, but it's not a area that I practice. And I couldn't even tell you which one is a chapter 11, a chapter 7, a chapter 13. One type of bankruptcy is for personal. The other two are for business. And I wouldn't even be able to tell you which is which. But overall, that's why they're still able to operate, because they're in reorganization.
Now, you said you've had a client have gone bankrupt?
Several clients have gone bankrupt.
Is it easy for them to rebound, or is it something that's a long process, like to get their credit back and establish that business acceptance?
Even a company like Bed Bath & Beyond, for example, there are hedge funds or other types of organizations that will buy them out of bankruptcy because the name has value, right? And they could basically set it up and do the exact same thing, but do it better, because whatever Bed Bath & Beyond did wrong, who knows what it is, opened up too many locations, ordered too many falufas, whatever mistake they made, this new organization thinks they can do it better. So they still have value, just maybe not revenue coming in.
Hey, well, as we're talking about finance, why don't you tell us about your guest today? I figure you've known him since you grew up with him. So tell us about our guest today and let's get to know him.
Yeah, so our guest today is my very good friend, George Nelson. He is a financial guy. I mean, he's been doing it forever. And I call it guy because I don't, as he told me today, you don't know exactly what I do you? And I'm like, now that I think about it, I don't. Other than the business he handles for me, I actually don't know. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to learn it. But, self-made guy, we grew up together, went to the same high school, went to the same University of Washington, and then randomly ran into each other in LA after college. And then, we've been practically inseparable, I would say. We don't see each other that much anymore because we both have had families and, on to business. But, he's one of the family. He's not even just a friend. He's actually what I would consider a family member. So, George, why don't you join us and let's say that you can introduce yourself properly. He usually looks much better than this. He's dressed like a homeless man.
Looks like a tennis pro. He looks like a tennis pro.
I am a member at the tennis club, Santa Monica and in Bellevue, Washington. Yes.
So George, I don't remember. It was my senior year, your sophomore year, and then you started hanging out with my troubled friends. And
Well, no, we're not that far apart. In age, we're 2 years apart, but grades in high school, I was a junior when you were a senior in high school.
oh, okay, yeah. So then we lost touch after high school because I went to the Navy, and then I don't know, you were doing cruise ships or something. I don't remember exactly what you were doing.
I was in college, but I also didn't start college till 2 years after graduation. So that's how we ended up lining up, kind of running into each other at the University of Washington too, which, if you recall, I believe the first time was we ran into each other on one of the metro buses, commuting on and off the campus. But yeah, so I had a couple years after high school before I started college, and then did go to college locally where we grew up in Seattle. I went to a community college, Edmonds Community College, and then from there went up to Western a year, Western Washington University, with aspirations of playing football there, and then went back down for my last 2 years to University of Washington in the business school there. And that's where we ran into each other. Then we both graduated. John with his poli-sci, wasn't it?
No, I took the easiest one I could get. You always know the easy disciplines because it's wherever the attractive girls and the athletes are, right? So when I looked around, it was sociology, and I'm like, all right, I'm doing that because I wasn't very studious, honestly, definitely not in high school. But you need a degree to go to law school, and I decided to go to law school, and so I wanted the easiest thing that would give me the highest grade. So I picked sociology.
Yeah. So then that's where we lost track again because, we were in different programs, different ends of the campus. I didn't realize he had moved to LA, and I moved sometime after him, actually. And we ran into each other on a nightclub, literally walking up to the bar, and he was bumping into me rudely and aggressively, as it happens in bars and nightclubs. And so I bumped him back because I'm a lot bigger than him. I moved him. And then we turned around and we looked at each other with excitement. What are you doing here? What are you doing here? But basically, yeah, we've been inseparable since we were kids, very close. I'm close to one of his younger brothers also, but much more so with John, and I am included with their family. And my kids are, they call him uncle and vice versa. So, yeah.
Oh, no, you had mentioned that you were in different majors at college. You said you were in a business school. What was your goal when you were in college? Did you always want to get into the financial world, or you think maybe management? What direction did you want to go when you were in college?
Even before I got to college, I had always had some feelings, aspirations of the financial world, stockbroker, stocks and bonds, and that game of elevation of excitement always had piqued my interest. And I was always good in math. I was always very astute and good in school, no matter what the subject matter was, but very good with anything mathematical. I actually initially wanted to be a math professor rather than finance. That was my first consideration, but I didn't want to be locked down. A big part of it is I didn't want to be locked down to someone else's schedule every day. And structurally, in that regard, I had some thinking in that way. So I had it at a very young age in my teenage years. And right out of college, I was actually a day trader, junior broker, basically for a couple years in downtown Seattle before I hit the road and moved down to LA. And other reasons, though, I actually moved down to LA because I was modeling for a little over 10 years. And at that time, I had agency in Seattle and in LA. And of course, there's a lot more work to be done in that field in LA. So I made my way moving around, navigating, starting my work down in LA in that field, and then moved into film production around the year 2000. I did that for about 5 years also. So I kind of dabbled in a few different things over my years, as many of us do, but always had a real feeling for finance and for math and investments. All that stuff was always kind of embedded in my thoughts and my feelings of growth in life as a young teenager.
So, George, I don't think we've ever talked about this before as much as we've been around each other, but what do you think the difference was between you and, because you didn't grow up with a very good background either. I mean, I won't say what that was, but typically people in your situation don't typically rise up and do good things and become independently wealthy or whatever else. So what do you think it was with you that made you want to be different and do things differently?
Well, so yeah, not to get too deep into my family background, but a little bit of it. My biological father was a drug addict and a drug dealer, and my mom left him when I was around 7 years old, and for good reason, because he didn't show up, wouldn't come home for days at a time, and sort of chose that life. He wasn't a bad guy, but got immersed into that, and he died at a pretty young age too. He died in 1999 at the age of 50. But from that point, when my mom left him, I have a 2-year older sister. He had the decision of, he just didn't want to be a dad anymore, and he wasn't. And we'd run into him on occasion at a mall or a gas station, bizarrely enough. And as a kid, I always yearned for my dad. I really idolized him, and he was a good dad for the first 7 years of my life. He loved me. He loved my sister. He was a loving person, strict, nothing wrong with that at all, though. Both of my grandfathers were lifers in the military, so real understanding of where that discipline came from. But, and my mom was, she was, I think she finished high school. I'm not even sure about that, but she, they went to high school together, but she wasn't high on the intellect level, a menial worker, struggled. She had no money. My dad never paid child support. In those days, there was no ramifications if you didn't. They didn't come after you. They didn't freeze or seize your accounts or anything. So my mom did it on her own with a lot of help from my maternal grandparents and a couple uncles and aunts. But we were pretty poor growing up as a kid. Similar. John had some, they didn't have much money. We have different stories, but there's similar lineal ways of, poverty, standing in food lines for food, being on food stamps, things of this nature. Other people in our lives really being profound and helping, whether family members or friends, coaches, professors in my life. I have some certain few that really made an impact and resonate with me. And so, when I was in fourth grade, I had a real feeling. I mean, it's not right that a fourth grader should think like that. And I have my memory's very acute. I remember my life back to 3 years old, moving forward. And I just knew that a lot of the things I saw going on, my dad, my mom, some uncles, some other stuff going on, I didn't want to be like that. I didn't want to be a part of it. And in fourth grade, we had this program for single parent families where they once a month, or maybe it was less than that, but they would take us off to go culture us somewhere. Tacoma's where I was born and raised the first 11 years of my life, but they'd take us to some event in like the opera or a cooking class, or how to hold your plateware and your all those things just resonated so much with me as a fourth grader and a fifth grader. Those were the only 2 years I was in that program with the school. But I just knew that from that point on, of fourth grade, I wanted something more than what I was being exposed to in my family home and what I saw in as far as the education of what they had or what was lacking thereof. There's a lot of love for my grandparents, though. Phenomenal people in my life, my grandma and grandpa on my maternal side. But it was a very young age. Kind of shitty that a young kid has to think like that, but it just happened to be. By the way, I have a sister who's a couple years older. She's been immersed in drugs pretty much her whole life. Her daughter has. My dad died again very young. One of my uncles, my mom's brother, drug addict, drug user. He died at a pretty young age. A cousin, she died at 27, very young age, overdose. My sister's daughter, I think I mentioned, she's living on the streets up in Seattle now. She's 33. For 8 years now, she's immersed in heroin use and living on the streets. So all those things, though, really for me as a young kid, I never wanted anything to do with it. I wanted to separate from it. I had some bizarre thinking in my thoughts at that young age that I knew stuff was wrong and I wanted something different.
I want to find out how you got into the finance world, but I want to ask you, because you grew up in that kind of lifestyle and you really didn't have much, Was it easier to you to go into a financial field or more of a risk? Because because you're thinking you wanted to be this way, but the worst thing would happen is if you didn't make it, you would still be alive, but you would be, that put an impact on you when you did risks in your career because you thought somewhat to a point where I have nothing to lose.
I never had those considerations, Steve, because I never had anyone just having those types of discussions with me. And it's interesting you bring up that exact word, risk. My 20-year-old son, who moved out a couple of years ago when he started college, and he's going to have a great path and career. He's a great human being, but I have that discussion of risk with him. I did last night. You bring up that word with anything, sort of directions you're taking. There's a risk factor involved, right? He got his first speeding ticket, John. I might need you to represent him in a couple of weeks here, but he got his first speeding ticket, and of course, as a dad, I've been on his ass since he's had his license, and he's got a neat little car recently. He's got the pipe on it that makes all the shitty noise and bothers all the neighbors, and he got his first ticket, and he didn't want to tell me, but the letter came to my address, so he got caught right by me. He always gets found out, right? It's not the end of the world, but that risk factor thing wasn't really a part of my thinking back then. And it's a great conversation that we should be having with the youth as they're coming up. What are risk factors of anything decision-making you're doing in life, whether it's driving, going to school, what type of profession you're going to have. I didn't have that really in my thoughts at the time, though.
With entrepreneurs, though, risk is one of the key elements, right? So the more risk adverse you are, the more difficult it is to be an entrepreneur. So I get what you're saying, which is basically physical risk or whatever. Of course, you want your kids to be safe, but also there has, if you want them to be like you, George, an entrepreneur, then you also don't want them to have the fear of failure, because that's what a good entrepreneur is. They fail upwards. They fail, they try the next thing. They fail, they try the next thing. Every time I fail, it feels bad, but what I tell myself is I just wasn't thinking big enough. And then I try something even bigger, and that seems to have worked for me. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's great, right? And that's how you get the reward, right? Is Steve or John, are you willing to take certain risks? And those risks may lead to failure, right? But that's where the reward is, over there on the other side of that risk, right?
What's your biggest failure in what you built? And then we could talk about what you built, because I don't even understand what you do clearly. So you'll have to explain it and then tell us your biggest fear.
Well, I suppose the biggest risk leading into my profession or career, whether it's a stockbroker or financial advisor. Now I'm not a stockbroker. I'm a broad scoped financial planner now, right? I plan for all the insurance aspects of, hey, we want to protect you and your family and your assets. And then once we secure those things that we're going to put in place, whether it's life insurance or the other things, long-term care insurance, which is a big aspect of financial planning to protect one's estate and assets, which we have those both in place for you, John. And most working professionals should have those things. And then we build up your assets. But for me in my profession, initially starting off, the big risk is that I just have to be a headhunter. I got to go out and find business. I'm risking my entire family, my livelihood, because I make no money until I get clients. It's really being a fully commission-based profession, I suppose. I don't know if it's helpful for me to say or respond in that regard with what you're asking, John. But my biggest risk jumping into this field I was in is just making no money unless I can convince people like you or anyone else to commit and allow me to guide you through your financial planning.
And the big payoff for that risk of maybe not making that money that month is, over time you have residual income that continues. So the more people that you advise that sign up with you, then the more money that you have residually. Is that correct, or is that how it works?
Well, yeah, there's many different facets of the way I earn income. If we're going to delve into that aspect of it, there are renewals. You have insurance products that are in my overall, clients, portfolios. Insurance is based on renewals. Then I have, when you're talking about the investment side of things, again, I have a retirement account with you also, right? I'm sure you don't mind me exposing your different aspects of planning that we do together. But you have a SEP IRA as a small business owner. You have a SEP IRA. And so, that's all invested in the market. And any and all of those, as far as I have investment wise, are assets under management. So quarterly, I'm getting assets under management for that also. But, if I have 401ks set up with small business owners that I do have, or their other employee benefits, monthly, as all of the employees contribute and buy shares of whatever they're buying, I'm getting every single month commission on every single purchase every month in that regard. And every month, the renewals I get from all the insurance stuff I put in place. So yeah, there's always, every single day, even if I lay in bed and sleep in, I'm still making money. Sorry, and the more clientele I have, which again, for nearly 25 years, I've got a pretty good client base that is all just sitting there, whenever things started or wherever things are continue to be contributed, whenever there's rollovers coming in, all that stuff just adds to assets under management, and then the renewal stream, and then the quarterly commissions that I get for amount of assets held.
Yeah. And I have several products with you, but just so people don't think that I'm with you just because you're my friend, it took George a long time to land me as a client, because it actually worked the opposite way. I mean, we've had some crazy times together, right? So when he's trying to talk to me about finances, I'm not trying to hear it from a guy that, that I've spent party time with, right? But there's one particular in all the products that I have with George, there's one particular product that I think if I had known about this when I was 20, I'd be a lot better off. It's supposed to be an insurance policy, but I use it as an investment vehicle. And George can explain it better than I can. But, I'm invested in everything, lots of real estate, crypto, gold, silver, stocks, bonds. But the product that I use most, and the one that's benefited me most, has been an insurance policy that George set up for me. So I'll let you explain that.
Well, so there's three different types of life insurance, really. One is the term insurance, which most people are familiar. It might be a 1 year, a 5 year, 10 year, 20 year, 30-year term. And that's just really renting your insurance for that amount of years. Hey, we have, a 30-year mortgage. George, it's $500,000. If I die or my wife does, we want to have a 30-year term policy. We know it's super cheap, or cheaper of the insurances. But we want to cover that potential loss if one or the other of us passes away. So there's term insurance, there's universal life insurance, and there are variations of universal life. There's a investment in the market, or there are what are called indexed, which I believe are not very well performing and have a lot of working parts. Anything index product is real shaky and suspect, right? I stay away from any of those. And I always sort of coach and tell to my clients, a fixed universal life is fine. So it doesn't have as much growth or growing in it for that savings account, so to speak. Most people don't understand there's savings accounts in life insurance that you can access while you're living. We'll move over. So I always say, to my clients, or I coach them in my knowledge base, and I like to think I'm a pretty well rehearsed and knowledgeable person. Why would we want to invest within our life insurance policies? We can do that in brokerage accounts. We can do that in our retirement accounts. Leave our life insurance to traditional, solid growing aspects of the savings account. And it has to be of the worth of the company, which I have an affiliation with New York Life, highly outstanding company, highest grade across the board from the grading companies, Moody and Poor's and all of that stuff. And they're a non-publicly traded company. So the third type of life insurance policy is a whole life insurance policy, and it can also be customized. So they would call it a custom whole life policy. And the customization would be the years that you might want to pay that off. And you could say, the shortest amount of years could be 5 years, and it could be up to the age of 75. So it depends on when one may have started it, right? You could go all the way up to age 75 if you're going to do customization of years. Johnny, I think we did a 10-year payout for his.
Well, George, let's focus on how I use it. I use it that way. I'm sure lots of people use it that way. I've seen it on YouTube, people instructing people to use it that way. But basically, I came to you and I said, hey, I want to keep investing in real estate, but I'm tired of going to banks and dealing with loans or whatever. What I want is a pot of money that whenever I want it, right? So explain my setup, because I think that's what's interesting. Because insurance is boring.
Yeah, it is. I mean, any aspects of this really are boring. Even financial stuff is pretty boring, and that's what's great for me because people just really want to go, George, tell me what's appropriate for me and set it up. So that's usually how it goes. John finally started asking more questions, and that's when it really gets fun for me too. Because when any one person is engaged, it's exciting for me, right? Because ideally I have the information and the ability to give the details back. But so what it really is John's stuffing in there a certain amount of dollars every month for a certain amount of years. And of course, we originate that. We're going to base it on how big do we want this policy. Let's say for John's regard, it was $1 million custom whole life policy. And normally you're going to pay a custom whole life or a regular whole life, traditional, up to age 100. Well, again, we want to shorten the years of it because our money we're stuffing in there gets to grow tax deferred. There's a lot of IRS and tax benefits to life insurance. People are unaware of it until they're coached in it, right? But you get this money, it gets to grow tax deferred, and it's growing based on guarantee 4% is what say we're just talking specifically about New York Life. We don't talk about specific numbers, but then there's dividends that pay in every single year to the policyholders. So the only companies that can issue whole life are non-publicly traded companies. Very few of them left. Maybe a handful. New York Life is one of them. Most people are familiar with New York Life, not the aspect of whole life insurance, though. And that dividends from the company go to the policyholders. There's no shareholder. You can't go buy a share of New York Life on the stock market. There's no share, right? It's a privately held company. So anyway, you have a real sense of growth in this policy. You get to look at the illustrations hypothetically from today to the future play out of what they project dividends to pay. You do know what the guaranteed 4% is going to play. So you got to pay. So you have a column and a column and a column, and you really look at the hard numbers to go, what is this thing doing for me? Most people generally are setting these things up, Steve, for supplemental retirement income, right? They've maxed out their 401ks. They've maxed out other pension plans I may be able to or not be able to set up for them. Usually those are only for partners and executives, right? Where I get to set up the additional pension plans. So someone who's an executive getting high paid, 250,000 plus, they're easily maxing out their annual 401k, and they've got a lot of extra money that they want to stash away. And this is a great place to place it, along with your leveraging your estate from day one. John pays month one. Let's say his first month is $1,000. Well, he has $1 million if he dies the second day he gets that policy. So he's leveraged his estate to his family tremendously, right? From day one. But then his real purpose is to generate income in his savings account, which again, I don't know what year we're in with this policy. The one it's nearly paid off in his regard because we set it up for a real short amount of term. And you're going to pay more because he's stashing that money in there faster. He wants to be done and pay this thing off. But he's got a huge bank account in there. And Johnny is a little more active than most people because most people are waiting for it to get into the non-paying years. And then that money comes out 90% tax-free. So you got tax-free money coming out in your retirement years where that's tremendous. And you know it's growing based on the dividend scale and the guaranteed payout of New York Life. So it's a really beautiful thing to see, and John is a great proponent of it, but he's a higher than usual user of it. He's moving money in and out of it all the time and with regularity. So he's got a really good hold and handle on how to functionally utilize his policy.
Now, I just want to backtrack for a second because it's all fascinating. But I'm trying to figure out how George went from modeling and production, which is so risky. It's always like I talk to actors all the time. I just talked to a guy I know who won 5 Emmys for Dennis Miller for writing. He was head writer. And he's like, any writer he talks to and any performer, you're always looking for work. It's like with you, when you're doing what you're doing, you have all these clients, but you are always looking for new clients. So how did you choose? I mean, a lot of people leave the entertainment world and go to something more like, milk toast, like something that's not like into restaurants or something like that. What made you choose finance and what you're doing? Because once again, it's all commission and you just came from that.
What made me choose to go back into finance? It was always remember, I had it in my thoughts as a teenager. My major is finance in college. So it was just always in my blood always in my thoughts. Yeah, it was just easy fit for me. And remember, I was a junior broker at Smith Barney for a couple of years right out of college too. So I had already dabbled in it. I studied it. So it was always the juices were always flowing there.
And George, you have clients all over the United States, right? Because I know you do a lot in Seattle and you do a lot in LA. Part of what you do is wealth building, right? Because that was part of what I wanted to do with you. So, what do you think the difference is wealth building in California versus other places? So, for example, when I first moved to LA, it was very easy to build wealth. I mean, there was just opportunities everywhere. Now, in my opinion, and because of what I do, defending business owners and entrepreneurs, I see that it's much more difficult now because of the taxation, the overregulation. So I see very, very, very wealthy, and I see very poor. It's like the middle class has been sort of sucked out of the economy in California, in my opinion. So based on what you do, what do you think? Do you see a difference between, I don't know what the best state is to build wealth. I couldn't even guess, but based on the state that you think is the best versus California, or maybe you think California is the best place to build wealth?
Yeah. So for me, it's of course wherever it's a higher cost to live, which California, LA, I would say LA because I have clients, all up and down the long state of California. And some areas are much more affordable to live, but you still have the implications of state taxes, right? Which are pretty high. I don't know where they stand. I think it's in the top five as far as.
Yeah, I think New Jersey's the worst, Steve, where you are.
Our property taxes are out the ass.
Well, and I have property tax issues too in Seattle, where they just passed about 6 months ago, passed the allowability to have the annual property taxes triple go up 3%, and it used to be 1% annually. So it's tripled what it was, which is outrageous. But that's what I'm dealing with in Seattle. So, really for me, John, it's and how I'm helping someone build their wealth. I really just need to, for me, I'm just not really telling them where to live or how to live. People just have to have money available to invest, right? That's the only way I'm able to help them grow some wealth, right? Well, and usually people I'm dealing with do have money, otherwise they're not sitting with me to meet with me, so they have to have something. And I deal with middle market also. Again, a lot of it is I have emotional ties to that. Growing up as a pretty poor, kid in my family, and all of them, there was not an ounce of financial planning. There was no retirement savings. There was never a life insurance policy that I've ever seen from anyone in my family. As far as close family goes. But so, yeah, it is really tough to live in these certain cities, in these certain states. Taxation is a big thing. Tax code is huge. I'm pretty fluent in tax code. I have to be in, with my designations, that's part of my higher learning. In addition to practicing is more than, hey, whatever you learned, are you practicing it? Do you deal with it day to day with your clients, George? And I do, right? I have to talk about tax code and 65 and over, senior citizens, what's their taxation? We know there's some new legislation that's gone through with this current administration that's benefiting seniors and families and stuff overall. So it really is for me, John. I don't dive into too much of where is it or why is it so expensive. We are dealt the hands we live where we choose to live. And I do have to work around those aspects of taxation though, and high cost of living. But, as I'm exposing someone's net worth and what they have available, what's their income, whether it's dual income or sole income, what do we have available? What do we have to deal with? What do we have to play with here? And what are the aspects of insurance planning and financial planning that are very important to you and your family?
Well, what advice can you give to someone young who moves to LA? And now LA rents are astronomical. I mean, I know where I lived in Burbank, I think when I moved, 8 years ago, I think it's going up 2.5 times. So you move there to follow your dreams. So you get a job waiting tables or whatever. Once you you pay for your rent, you pay for your car, and you pay for your insurance. You have nothing left. So what advice do you give these people? Do you say, get a third roommate, get this, or move some? I mean, because in LA, it's like, I don't think the bubble's going to break. It just seems rents just keep going up and up and up and up. And I mean, I talk to people in Burbank. Burbank's becoming a shithole, and Burbank used to be wonderful. But what do you tell someone young that is feeling hopeless somewhat? Because people do feel hopeless when they, I lived check to check before. It's a hopeless feeling. You don't know what the hell's going to happen next. What insight do you give to someone? What advice would you give someone who is looking at that and really wants to build something?
Reevaluate what your qualifications are, right, Steve? Like, what are you, educated to do? What are you trained to do? What are you passionate about to do? What value are you providing? It really is. You got to have some internal, like, what do you have to offer? And if you want more, well, you have to figure out something different, because your income that you're generating and where you're living might you have to consider living elsewhere if you're going to continue with the same, sort of profession and income earning capabilities. There's a lot of soul searching that people need to do too. And hey, say maybe us in our years of experience and such, we might be able to give them words of guidance and advice outside of just financial in that regard, really. Because if they're not earning the income to where they're barely covering their rent and other things, and John and I have been there, right? In our earlier years of our 20s, we everything was tight. We struggled.
Well, that's the interesting thing. And, this topic is near and dear to my heart. Number one, because I love entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. And I think that everything is better when you have people that want to create and employ other people. It's also near and dear to my heart because, there was a certain work ethic that was needed to be an entrepreneur. When we were coming up, George, like but it was encouraged, right? So it was almost worth it to do it. Even though there was risk involved and you failed and whatever else. I see this new generation and that group is getting smaller and smaller from what I can see, right? Because number one, it's not encouraged anymore. The people that want to own a business or start a business are considered it's just not the thing to do anymore, right? So there's that aspect of it. Then the other aspect of it is it just seems so hopeless, right? Here you are, and you can't afford a house. Rents are going up. The cost of living, more taxes, more taxes, more taxes, and then it's almost like, well, why bother? Why don't I just get a free lunch somewhere because that's offered, that's encouraged, So it just is one of these topics that, I think, California, when I moved there, used to be the hotbed of entrepreneurship, and it was just such a great place to live. And now it just seems to have changed a little bit. The business owners are now the evil guys, right? They're not the heroes that produce and provide value and start things and employ people and pay the majority of the taxes. It just isn't like that anymore.
Well, I was going to say real quick, I've noticed in New Jersey, is because after the pandemic, a lot of older people, they were just tired of the bullshit and they started becoming entrepreneurs. And it's very weird in New Jersey. There's a whole brand. Of course, everyone says they're an entrepreneur, no matter what they're doing. I mean, you can sell Avon and you're saying, I'm an entrepreneur. It's like, no, you're not. You're an Avon lady. Ring a bell, but it's a matter of, it's really happened with the older people now. And you're right. I run a big networking event. I don't see a lot of younger people out networking. Like when we were younger, like around my early days in comedy, you were always out networking, meeting people, meeting comics, meeting bookers. And now I think that, like, as you said, John, it's like they're helpless somewhat.
Well, what are your thoughts on that, George?
The city of Los Angeles, John, you've left. I think it's 3 years now, isn't it, since you left? I helped him pack up some of the stuff too. A lot of this town has left as far as the movie making industry, because of costs and what the city is charging, production companies. They're going elsewhere because they get tax credits in New Orleans, or they're getting tax credits in North Carolina or Georgia. Canada has even stole a lot of film production.
Yeah, I've got a longtime friend, famous producer and director. He's doing stuff out of the Dominican Republic.
And I have a lot of clients. And again, I worked in the film industry for 5 years. Easily, I have many, many clients that are in the industry that I have conversations with, and I'm very familiar with their world, so to speak. One of my best friends that you know fairly well too, John, is another friend. He's a writer, a pretty successful writer, Paul Cuccieri. He moved away a little over a year ago to Miami, Florida. He's still writing, but left the state and doesn't want to deal with the state tax, and the industry itself is pretty much gone into the tanks, and he can work from anywhere. So he's chosen to plant himself over there, and he's working as an adjunct professor too at FIU, 2 or 3 days a week. But yeah, most all of my and other small business owners that I have as clients originating from the state of California, they've left to other states. A lot have gone to Texas. Arizona is huge. A lot of our friends, and I'm a little more tied into our friends that we grew up with up in Seattle, and I have a home up there. So I'm there about 50-50, LA to Seattle. But I don't want to dive into the political side of it, but there's definitely a tie-in with that too. These Democratic run states are just being driven into the ground senselessly. And is there a turnaround, you guys? I don't know. Is there a turnaround on it? Is there any recourse?
I believe in Los Angeles though, because it seems to ebb and flow. And when I first moved there, it was right after the Rodney King stuff, and it was unsafe to live in Los Angeles back then. But by around 2000, it really started hitting its golden period, at least in from when I was living there, and it was great. It was like one of the safest cities. Restaurants, when Silicon Beach started, that was pretty exciting. All those tech billionaires were like, "What are we doing in rainy San Francisco? We could do the exact same thing here, in Venice, right?" And then we had the financial crisis, 2008, but that lasted a few years, and then LA really, really came up, and then I started seeing odd things like around 2017 is when I started noticing. I don't know when someone else noticed, but I started noticing more homeless, more, because downtown was such a gem, and then suddenly it wasn't, right? And I started noticing it because I lived downtown. I mean, for a long time, and it just was starting to get odd, and then COVID hit, and then it just, I don't know if it's even recovered. I'm back in LA quite a bit. I'm not quite 50-50, but close enough, right? Uh, and even Burbank, like you were saying, Steve, just I'm like, whoa, Burbank, because that's where my home is in Burbank, and it just isn't the same from the days, Steve, when you and I were running the streets of Burbank, hitting bars and restaurants, and seeing the same 100 people a night that we knew, and it just isn't like that anymore.
Now, okay, we got to wrap up soon, but I want to ask you both to answer this question. Okay, for someone who's young and wants to build wealth and lives in LA, each of you give them, we'll start with you, George, give them some encouragement that they can listen to and they can go, okay, I have hope. Because people, as you said, John, young people are hopeless. So what's some encouragement you give, George?
Oh, and I probably should have answered this earlier because you pretty much answered or asked this earlier, Steve. Even that person that's basically on fumes or really tight with their funds in those, years of 25, 8 years of age and 30 years of age is just, if you really can, and I say this, just discipline yourself, even if it's $50 or $100 a month. And I really tried to have them consider that, put $100 and just put that in an investment every month in a Roth IRA or whatever it may be, or a custom whole life policy, which they could start a very good one for $100 a month too, right? The parameters of it. But just if you could discipline yourself, because everybody has, even when you're, really tight, you could put aside $50 to $100 a month to just really beat it into them, to invest some way, somehow, whatever vehicle it may be, set aside $50 to $100 a month would really be is always regularly my encouragement for the young men and women that, we may encounter on our day to day.
Okay. How about you, John? What's your give a quick encouragement?
I would start out by telling them that they're living in an age where they have more information than anyone has ever had ever, right? George and I, and you too, Steve, used to have to go to the library for this stuff or ask somebody, right? Now it's at their fingertips. They're also living in an age where everyone can be creative now. Like I can't write music, but I definitely have good ideas. Hey, what if you mixed up this music with this music? What would that sound like? And I can go to AI and it'll do it for me. Right. So they're living in an age where they have the most information and they have the most ability to be creative. So my advice to them would be block out the noise, figure out what you love or what you're skilled at, figure out what value you could bring to that and use all these tools around you to create that. That's my advice.
That's actually great. Actually, John says too, Steve, just to cut in. And I, sort of try to instill that in my two kids is just make contacts, open your sights up, open your thoughts up, and pay attention to your surroundings. It's huge.
Get out and network. That's what I always say. So, George, if someone wants to watch the show or listen to it, and they go, man, George is really knows what's going on. How can they get in touch with you to invest with you?
So yeah, I can be reached by my personal email. It's George H. Nelson, the number 6 at gmail.com. Or I have my business email also, which is gnelson at ft.nyl.com. That's FT as in Frank Tom .nyl.com. That's my business account. I don't know if I need to give my phone number, but John has my phone numbers.
People also, if you want to get in touch with me, well, first of all, you gotta go on the YouTube or Spotify or Apple Music, follow Lawsuits and Lessons. We've had some great guests. Follow us, subscribe. You want to watch us, tell your friends. If you want to follow more about me, go to coopertalk.net. I have over 1,050 episodes up there of my one podcast, and you can email me at coopertalk.net. And John, closing words and how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, they can get in touch with me by going to defendmybiz.com or just doing a search for John Fagerholm. I used to hate my last name, but now in this era of names and so many people in the world and so easy to get a hold of everybody, my name is actually a benefit because very few people have it, like one other guy in the US and some guy in Norway or something. So this is perfect. If you type in John Fagerholm, I'm the first guy that pops up. And in closing, of course, thank you, George, for number 1, your friendship, number 2, for hanging out with us today, giving us a good description of what you do and why you do it. And Steve, thank you. You're always the great host. And good night, everybody.